Hello everyone, I'm Hoko. This video is about tanka poetry. Tanka literally means short poetry. It is a 5-line poem with 5-7-5-7-7 Japanese syllables. Historically, 5-line poems have been called waka poetry. Waka literally means Japanese poetry. It was elegant culture enjoyed mainly by the aristocrats.
In the mid-19th century, the samurai warrior government headed by the shogun general, which had lasted for 260 years, came to an end, and a new government began with the emperor as the top. During the samurai regime, Japan was closed off from the countries in the world, and the culture unique to Japan, such as haiku poetry, kabuki performance and so on, greatly developed. However, the new regime opened its doors to many countries and actively adopted Western culture. This is where the waka poetry innovation activity was widespread. People began to call 5-line poems tanka instead of waka.
Compared to earlier waka poetry, tanka has 4 features. Tanka is a poetry common people can compose. Its theme is everyday life. It has no elaborate techniques. It shows direct expression of emotion. In the video, you'll appreciate 12 tanka poems by 10 great poets. They lived from the mid-19th to the mid-20th centuries. You realize the sensitivity of their poetry, which is not at all old-fashioned, even from a current point of view. You'll also learn how Western culture changed Japan at that time. I hope you'll enjoy it.
In the mid-19th century, with the end of the samurai warrior government and the establishment of a new government, Japan was greatly influenced by Western culture. Western-style buildings were built, and more people began to wear Western clothes. Cars and trains came into use as a means of transportation. The first poem is by Ochiai Naobumi. He was born a few years before the new administration took office and died of illness at the age of 42. He formed a tanka group early on and became the central figure in the tanka innovation movement. He emphasized the importance of one's own individuality without imitating anyone, including predecessors. This poem was composed when he was sick in bed. In his time, the position of father was strong and highly respected in the household. Chichigimiよ、今朝はイカにと手をつきて、問う子を見れば、死なれざりけり。Morning, father, how are you feeling? My son asked, kneeling down, with his hands on the floor. Now I can't die leaving him. How would you feel if you heard insects chirping in the grass? Do you think it's noisy? Or are you moved by their beautiful voices? The second tanka is by Nagatsuka Takashi. Since ancient times, Japanese people have composed poems about the sound of insects in autumn. When Japanese people hear the sound of insects, they feel the autumn season deeply. Nagatsuka Takashi describes such Japanese sensibilities in his poem. Umaoiのひげのそよろに来る秋は、まなこを閉じて、思い見るべし。Like whiskers of grasshoppers, so slowly and secretly, autumn is approaching. So close your eyes and catch is coming. In the present aging society, dementia or losing of memory is a growing problem. However, it has probably always been the case that such symptoms occur as one gets older. The next poem is by Ota Mizuho. In the mid-20th century, he wrote a poem about the anxiety of fading memories. 物忘れ、またうち忘れ、隠しつつ、命をさえや、明日は忘れん。Getting forgetful, so forgetful day by day. Tomorrow I might be forgetting that I am even alive. The next two tanka were written by Yosano Akiko. She is one of the most famous poets of the modern era. She had a passionate personality and got married her tanka poetry teacher who had been married at that time. Through the association formed by her husband, she became involved in the tanka innovation movement. Eventually, she surpassed her husband as a leading figure not only in tanka poetry but also in the fields of modern translations of classic Japanese literature, education, the advancement of women, and so on. Her tanka poems range from love, travel, natural scenery, and more. 何となく君にまたるる心地していでし花野の夕月よかな Somehow I feel you, somewhere waiting for me. I took myself farther to the field of flowers. The evening moon is shining. 金色の小さき鳥の形してイチョウ散るなり夕日の丘に Falling ginkgo leaves in the form of little birds, shining like gold on a hill illuminated by the setting sun. The next two tanka were composed by Ishikawa Takuboku. He is probably the most favorite tanka poet of the Japanese people. He was born at the end of the 19th century. As his father lost his job in his young days, he had to support his family. His life was very poor until his death from tuberculosis at the age of 26. He left behind a great number of tanka poems. Many of them are included in Japanese language textbooks. 働けどなお我が暮らし、楽にならざり、じっと手を見る。No matter how hard, I keep on working. Life not getting easier. I'm just staring at my both hands. In the next tanka, Takuboku mentions buying flowers. Those days, Western flowers are very popular. 友が皆、我より偉く見ゆる日よ。花を買い着て、妻と親しむ。On the days when all my friends look so much greater than me, I buy some flowers and go home to spend the time with my wife. The next one is by Sasaki Nobutsuna. Western poetry and paintings are also introduced to Japan. This also influenced the tanka poetry of the time, and the poems reminiscent of Western paintings began to be composed. I'll show you two examples. The first one is by Nobutsuna. 幼きは幼きどちの物語。ぶどうの陰に月傾きぬ。A group of young children gathering and chatting under the vine trellis. The moon has hidden behind the grapes. The next tanka is by Maeda Yugure. This poem is said to be influenced by Van Gogh's Sunflowers. ひまわりは金の油を身に浴びて、ゆらりと高し日の小ささよ。As you being bathed in golden oil, the sunflower stretching out, trembling its top. The sun looks much smaller. People often say that married couples who have been together for many years become like air to each other. Kubota Utsubo wrote a poem about such a relationship. おい二人、互いに空気となり合いて、あるには忘れ、なきを思わず。Two of us, as couple, being like the air, so natural to be with, forgetting its presence, not even imagining its absence. Saito Mokichi was a great poet and psychiatrist. He was born in the Tohoku region of Japan. He was highly praised as a child prodigy from a young age, but his family was too poor to make him go on to higher education. At the age of 15, he moved in a doctor's house in Tokyo. He continued his studies and the patronage by the doctor and later married his daughter. When his own mother became critically ill, he left Tokyo for his home village. He composed many touching tanka poems about her death. The next is one of them. 道のくの母の命を一目見んとぞただに急げる Far to the hamlet in 東北 I hurried, just hurried at home to see the last moment before my mother is gone. The last tanka is by Tsuchiya Bunmei. He was born into a very poor farm family in the countryside. When he was in junior high school, he began to pursue literature and moved to Tokyo. Relying on a famous poet and under his patronage, he continued his studies and poetry. Taking over from Saito Mokichi, he became the editor and publisher of a tanka magazine. He considers the life itself to be a poem, and he also writes tanka about his experiences of extreme poverty. 我が持てる貧しき者の癒しさをこの友に見て耐え難かりき As reflected in the mirror, the meaningless that I have, peculiar to only the poor, I found also in my dear friend. I just can't stand it. This is the end of the video.